Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Toilets and Titles. My name is Justin Stevens, and we are back at you with another offseason breakdown episode. This one, the Detroit Lions, a team that's making moves, some absolute moves. And speaking of making moves, we've got a returning guest here, Dave Birkett. He a three-time award-winning writer for the Detroit Free Press, and obviously covers the team that you love in the background. You also might see a familiar face if you're into the fantasy football world, which is where we began. So obviously I've got a heart for fantasy football. The man Daniel Dopp down there at the bottom. We're going to get to some house cleaning and all that in just a moment, but I just wanted to show you these faces real quick because we're about to roar. All right. As far as the housekeeping, guys, don't forget you can check us out, toiletsandtitles.com, patreon.com/toiletsandtitles. We're gaining some traction. We're gaining a lot of support from you guys, from you viewers. You guys are absolutely wonderful. This is the Detroit Lions breakdown episode. My first guest right here next to my side, Dave Birkett. Dave, first off, I want to say that I've noticed that you have a very intriguing article out there here recently about Calvin Johnson. If they go to your Twitter, which is right down there at the bottom, at Dave Birkett, they can click on that link. Make sure you subscribe to Dave's work. I don't want to give anything away, but do you want to kind of tease a little bit about that article real quick?
Yeah, well, first, that was my colleague Carlos Munares, as he talked to Calvin this week. But I've stayed in contact with Calvin a little bit here, and he's got a couple of charity events coming up, and so I kind of know a little bit about what's going on. He's been out of the graces of the Lions for some time. They obviously had a dispute. I think most people know that about his retirement and the money they made him pay back. Slowly but surely, that is getting fixed. I think I don't know if it's quite official yet, but he's certainly on the path to be like a Barry Sanders, have a sort of ambassador role with the team. The Lions paid Barry handsomely after Barry had his own dispute with the team years ago, and now Barry is around. You see him at home football games and different events, and Kelvin was there when the Lions welcomed their 2 first-round picks to town. He stopped by a day of OTAs already, so you'll see Kelvin in time. His jersey will be retired, and he'll be back. Part of the Lions family full time.
That would be absolutely wonderful. You guys have so much talent at the wide receiver position right now to be able to get him in and around the team, maybe be a little bit of a mentor and a leader, even if it's not on a full-scale coaching scale. But the next guest, Daniel Dopp, you know him from the 06010, the Fantasy Football Focus. This is one of the shows that I started listening to several years ago that kind of got me motivated and kind of got me interested in podcasting myself. So Daniel, I mean, I'm trying not to be super nervous here and fanboy, but as you can tell by the way that I'm stumbling on my words and I screwed up the intro, this isn't normal for me, but I really appreciate your time. You and Dave are 2 of the busiest men in the industry. So Daniel, why don't you talk a little bit real quick about the most recent episode dropped about Field's top 100 real quick.
Yeah, we had a ton of fun with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm super stoked to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm also nervous because I don't get to do shows with Dave Birkett very often. And Dave doesn't know this, but I've been reading Dave's work for years. I'm one of those like silent people in the background that like always. Although, Dave, I do want to ask you this question. Why does Carlos hate the Detroit Lions?
Yeah, I mean, it's in his blood. I don't know. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I can't be the only one to ask you that. But I love all the stuff that you guys do over there. At the Free Press. I love read everything, being from Michigan and whatnot. So like being able to talk Lions and be able to do this is always a ton of fun for me. Yesterday on the show, in case you're listening today on Thursday, May 25th, we talked with Field Yates and Mike Clay about Fields' top 100 for the fantasy season and kind of dove into some of the areas where we agreed with him, some of the areas where we disagreed with him. And spoiler alert, as much as Twitter, not to jump us in, as much as Twitter hated the pick of Jahmyr Gibbs at 12, Fields got him at running back 16 heading into the season, which is extremely high from a fantasy perspective. So like, forget Twitter, right? Like, I think from a fantasy perspective, we're in on it, and I'm excited to be able to see what Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be able to do with us. But we dove in and did a lot of that, which was a lot of fun. So you can go ahead and check it out on YouTube. We did that live, so you can go find the video there or anywhere that you get your podcast, so you can listen to us.
And for what it's worth, like I said, I do have more of a fantasy background. So your take on taking a guy like Jamar Chase earlier on and Jahmyr Gibbs later does sound a lot better to me than that alternative.
Me too.
Of taking Bijan and say, I don't know.
Michael Pittman. I mean, if you get Michael Pittman in that same range, right, there's a lot of question marks right now with Anthony Richardson, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but, with accuracy issues that they're going to talk about and how off target they were in Indianapolis last year to begin with. So I don't know. There's at least a conversation. I think the Detroit Lions were pretty good at running the football last year if we want to talk about some numbers. So I'm not that worried about Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And that's just a quick insight of what kind of information you guys will get on the fantasy show. This one's not exactly fantasy centric. I want to give these guys an opportunity to just talk about their team. You can get into fantasy all you want. I'm perfectly up for that. But what I want to start off with is we currently have a lot of good young talent, a lot of good young athletic talent across the board on this team. And you guys did add Hendon Hooker as your backup quarterback. How long do we see Jared Goff now that we have Hendon Hooker back?
I don't think Hendon Hooker will be playing anytime soon, and maybe not much at all for the Lions. I mean, really, this is a prove-it year in a lot of ways for Jared Goff. I mean, he had such a good second half of the season last year. Didn't start off so hot, didn't have a great first year in Detroit, but he took great care of the football down the stretch. I think it was 324 straight attempts without an interception. You do that when you have the offensive weapons that the Lions have around them. When they're able to run the ball, like Daniel said, you got a chance to win a lot of games, and that's really the case this year. And so Hendon Hooker to me is more insurance policy than anything, right? If Goff regresses, if he doesn't have that good of a year, maybe if he gets hurt, you sort of see what he is. But if Jared Goff has the season or if the Lions have the season, I think that we all expect them to have, he's going to be in line for a contract extension. And if that's the case, then, Hooker is your insurance policy and maybe trade bait down the road. But I like the draft pick. I like spending that resource on him just to have him as just in case. But I wouldn't expect to see him on the field anytime soon.
I fully agree with that. I don't think that Hendon Hooker is going to be out there soon. But listen, grabbing a guy in the third round when we've needed a backup quarterback for a while, it's such a low investment pick. Now, understanding he's not going to, like you said, Dave, he's not going to be like ready to go from the start of the season. We're going to have something else that we're figuring out as far as backing up Jared Goff. But you take a dart throw on a third rounder and you talk about this is what teams try to do, right? If you can find that cost controlled quarterback for whatever reason, and now you've got him for 2 to 3 years in a prime window when the rest of the team has been built, you're in a really great spot to be able to potentially make some moves. So Lions are going to be in a really big position to decide whether or not they want to pay Jared Goff like real quarterback money soon. And that's going to be a big decision, not just for them, but for Lions fans. I can feel it.
That's a lot of money to spend. Then you're right. Hey, third round pick. I mean, he's got more upside than your typical third round quarterback, I think. So that's part of the roll of the dice there too, right? Like hey, they took 4 guys that they think are going to help them with their first 4 picks. Then you get Hendon early in round 3, and even if you don't use him right now, he's got some upside in case Jared doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, like you said, the trade bait if they are able to get him some time on the field, hopefully when the Lions are up by 21 in the fourth quarter, and he can kind of prove himself a little bit on the field, then you've got that trade bait possibility. But I kind of buried the lead a little bit. And when we're talking offseason moves, we got to look at that draft, right? So they're trying to build something special here. And I think personally, as an outsider, as a non-Detroit fan, I feel like Campbell is doing an incredible job at kind of rebuilding the brand of the Lions. And my son's a huge Lions fan, so I do watch a lot of the games, and it's exciting to see a guy that excited on the sidelines. I'm not going to lie. He brought in Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, Sam Laporta, and Brian Branch. Those are those top four that you guys were just talking about that you kind of expect to see immediately. So let's start with that running back core, because when they brought in David Montgomery early on in the offseason, I kind of thought, you know what, he's going to shine. Like this is good for him, but he's also not that every down kind of back. He needs some kind of change of pace. Well, then they kind of surprised me, brought in Jahmyr Gibbs, who's not only just a change of pace. Like I'm starting to think maybe David Montgomery is going to be the change of pace. So absolutely incredible running back core. But what am I missing anything there? Is there something else in that running back room? We'll start with you again, Dave. Do you see anything super special with Jahmyr Gibbs like I do, or am I just kind of looking at it with those blue-colored glasses?
Look, I want to hear Daniel on this, because I mean, truthfully, like I need my fantasy insight too, right? Like I think I don't know, Daniel, if we talked about this at camp a couple of years ago or not, but I because I cover the NFL, sometimes I tend to think like, all right, I know what's going on. I'm gonna take this rookie, and I take him, and then it's a year later before he hits. You sort of. So I got to get your insight on Gibbs here. Look, the pick itself, from a football standpoint, I like the player. I think he's a really good player. I think he will help them. The pick itself, I think I fall like a lot of people did, where maybe the Lions overvalued the positions a little bit, but in a draft that wasn't particularly deep, and in a year where they expect to contend, they got a couple guys. Their first three picks are all going to help them, should be starters in some form or fashion, in Gibbs at least, that will help them on the field this fall. But let's hear you, Daniel. I want to hear what you say about Gibbs.
Yeah. So I will start by saying that like everybody else, like you just said, there was a lot of question marks about the positional value, right? But one thing that I do love is it did feel like in this draft, where there were a finite number of prospects that the Lions wanted to target, they went out and Brad Holmes had conviction on, I'm leaving the draft with this guy. I'm going out and I'm getting my player. And it's not one of those situations where it was like I don't care what the rest of your boards look like. I don't show up to a fantasy draft and I'm sharing someone else's cheat sheet. Like I bring my own cheat sheet. I don't need to draft off of yours. I know what I want to build my team to look like. So I got a couple of numbers here, right? Jamaal Williams last year had 38 goal to go rushes, 38, which led the NFL. Second was Jalen Hurts with 23. Now you're bringing in a guy like David Montgomery, who I think has a lot more. I love Jamaal Williams. I love Jamaal Williams. I think he has a lot more when it comes to being able to be a better fantasy player for people from that perspective. And I think that David Montgomery is going to be better as a running back for the Detroit Lions as well. Here's why. Jamaal Williams, yards before first contact, 2.18 yards before first contact. DeAndre Swift, 3.21 yards before first contact. That is not just about them, although DeAndre Swift obviously far and ahead in front of Jamaal Williams. But that Lions offensive line is unreal. Absolutely incredible. And David Montgomery did not get to run behind a line like that in Chicago. David Montgomery, 1.95 yards before first contact, almost a full yard less than DeAndre Swift, less than Jamaal Williams. And at the same time, David Montgomery was better after contact. So when you talk about be able to have a little bit of that wiggle, a little bit of that boost that I didn't think that Jamaal Williams had, he was great for us with what we needed for our short yardage guy to be able to pound it in at the end zone. They obviously relied on him huge to give him almost 40 goal to go carries. But bringing in Jahmyr Gibbs and what he does as a pass catcher with his explosiveness, and what David Montgomery can do in that Jamaal Williams type role while adding more pass catching to that, I think is going to be huge for this Detroit Lions running back crew that already led the NFL in fantasy points from a running back duo last year. So I'm fully in on both Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, because I think the offensive line has only gotten better. I think Jared Goff, after what they had during the end of that stretch, is just going to keep getting better. This offense got so much better through the end of last year. This is weird. I don't know if this is going to make sense, but Dave, as a Lions fan, I feel like we have, and I've talked to my best friend Kurt about this for a long time, who's really active on Lions Twitter. I feel like we get ourselves pumped up about Lions seasons more than we should, because we're trying to like convince ourselves, dang it, this is all right. Well, there's something that we have to root for. This year is the year that we can finally, but like we're always, that's not real. We're always making up reasons why we have reasons to be excited. This finally feels like we have a front office, a coaching staff that has established both the offensive and defensive line going from the insides out. And we watched how that running game looked last year. I think that leaning on that the way that they want to with these two running backs is going to be fantastic. They were 2 top 20 fantasy running backs last year. I have them both as top 25 heading into the offseason. And it would not shock me if you had 2 top 20 fantasy running backs again, with the way that they're going to utilize Jahmyr Gibbs in the passing game and what I expect for them to do with David Montgomery replacing Jamal Williams in that role.
I'm going to file that away for my fantasy draft when it comes time. But no, look, I'm with you. I've covered this team for the Free Press since 2010. And, I've told people this before, either, doing shows or friends or family, whatever it is that ask me about this. I do believe, this is the first time I think I've said it, where I believe where the Lions are headed. That they still have some holes, right? I look at the receiver core, especially the first 6 weeks of the season, and it's maybe a little bit light without, Jamison Williams. There's a little bit of projection that you need there, and certainly injuries could, blow anything up, and you still want another, pass rusher up front. But I like what they're doing. I think Brad Holmes is really good at identifying talent, and that's what you need your GM to be. And I think Dan Campbell is really good at managing people. And as a head coach in the NFL, that's probably the biggest thing. And he's got a bright offensive coordinator, really good offensive coordinator in Ben Johnson. So I think they have a lot of pieces in place. And sticking with the running back, situation, look, it's, David Montgomery he's been durable. He's had 200 carries plus 200 plus carries every year of his career. And so I think you can, maybe it's probably not right to expect him to reach Jamal Williams' level of touchdown production in 2023, but he's going to be out there and he's going to get plenty of carries and he's going to be a big part of this offense. And then Gibbs, look, the Lions, I think last year, both Williams and Swift had about 60 catches combined, and that was because Swift was dealing with an injury a lot of times. And if you go back 2 years ago, Swift had 60-plus catches himself. So that's what they want Jahmyr Gibbs to be. Gibbs is going to catch a lot of passes. He's probably going to get 125, 150 carries, maybe something like that this rookie season. But he's going to be on the field a lot, and he's going to play with David Montgomery as long as both those guys are healthy. So I do think they have a nice 1-2 tandem at the running back position where Jahmyr Gibbs is, he's going to put up some production both as a receiver and a rusher. And if you're playing in a PPR, for fantasy purposes, I definitely think he's a back that you want to own.
Well, and really quickly, coming off of that and I know this is fantasy, but Jamal Williams, 92.3% of his points came from rushing. So he didn't catch passes. He wasn't used in the passing game. When you look at DeAndre Swift, 44% of his fantasy points came from rushing. So we've replaced these two guys, and it just feels like you're just going to be able to fit Jahmyr Gibbs right into that DeAndre Swift role. I totally am with you. We're not going to see 17 touchdowns from David Montgomery, although it would be awesome if it happened. But that number is just bound to regress just based on regression within the NFL. But he's still going to be that guy, and I think he's still going to have a really great year, especially because he's going to be the number 2 guy behind a rookie. I think David Montgomery, you'll probably be able to get a little bit later in fantasy draft because everyone's going to want to get that rookie because he's more exciting and tantalizing. Montgomery will provide you a ton of value, though, I think.
Outstanding. I like it. You guys both kind of mentioned about how good that offensive line is. I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on the offensive line. They're going to be phenomenal. I do want to say that PFN has them ranked as the 3rd top offensive line heading into the 2023 season at this point. But one of the teams above them are the Browns, and we know that the Browns are going to Brown, so they don't really count. So pretty strongly going to be a top 2 offensive line, in my opinion. So having a strong offensive line really helps the dynamic of the offense in another way as well. The tight end doesn't necessarily have to stay in and block constantly to help out, like my Indianapolis Colts. But anyway, so with that tight end position, they did make a move. They did get Sam Laporta. We got to see a little bit of Brock Wright last season, and I wasn't disappointed, to be honest with you, considering who Brock Wright was. I mean, essentially kind of a no-name for the most part. I felt like he did a great job of stepping in after the TJ Hawkinson trade. Are you guys confident in this tight end room to be able to do what Dan Campbell needs them to do?
Well, I think they have, guys with a variety of skills. Obviously Laporta, they targeted him specifically for his receiving skills, and that's what he's going to be. And as a rookie, I wouldn't expect huge numbers from that position. There's still a lot to learn, but
do they like Mitchell?
That's the role that he's going to fill. And, I think you look at what the Lions did with that position last year, 12 touchdowns from their tight ends. And half of that production or so was after they traded TJ Hawkinson. So the way Ben Johnson used it, former tight ends coach, I do think you'll still see some production there, but it's not all going to be Sam Laporta. Brock Wright's going to play as that blocking guy. James Mitchell, they still like him, their 5th-round pick from last year. So you'll see that ball spread out between all three of those guys a little bit, or the playing time at least spread out between all three of those guys.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what it's going to look like, but I have yet to really dive into my rookie tight end stuff. So I'm going to take Dave's word for it on Laporta, and it's one of those things I got to research. Because from a fantasy perspective, like I'm not looking at any of the rookie tight ends this year. You're not drafting anybody. There's no Kyle Pitts in this class or anything like that. So, if anything, I'm looking at it as a fan, and I think the idea of Sam Laporta coming in to be able to replace that TJ Hawkinson, which hurts. That hurt. I love TJ. But, I'm pumped to be able to see what it is. That I got high hopes for Sam.
I would say with Sam, he's from the Lions weapon standpoint, right? You got Amon-Ra St. Brown, the running backs. I mean, Jameson when he's back, maybe. And then you're probably looking at the tight end after that. They got some other veteran receivers there that'll get plenty of catches early. But to Daniel's point, Sam Laporta can be effective for the Lions in a small role, but I don't know that he's going to put up the volume of numbers that you want if you're drafting a player for your fantasy team.
Sure.
Outstanding. The obvious addition to that defense, Jack Campbell. So we're going to shift gears a little bit to defense. What other major changes or additions did they add to this Lions defense? Because, again, I'm not a super fan like you guys. I don't pay super close attention. So I need to know what's going to help improve this defense even more.
Dave, talk about the secondary.
Yeah, that's where it starts. I mean, they went into the offseason with a clear focus to upgrade the secondary. The Lions were last in the NFL in yards allowed last year, near the bottom in points allowed. Their secondary was pretty bad most of the season. And they went out and they signed Cam Sutton, who's going to start. They signed Emmanuel Mosley, who, assuming he's healthy, is going to start. We'll see how healthy he is when training camp rolls around. And then they got C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's probably going to be that, slot corner safety for them, do a little bit of everything. So 3 new starters in there. Tracy Walker coming back at safety as well off a torn Achilles. I expect him to be back for the start of training camp, sort of on that Jeff Okudah, timetable from last year. Very early in training camp, at least. So the secondary is going to look completely different than it did a year ago. And, if you ask anyone in that building, they came away from that season thinking, man, our secondary was really the Achilles heel of our defense. And if we upgrade that, maybe we have a chance. And they did that. And again, I still think they need maybe a little more interior pass rush. It's, probably, I know a lot of Lions fans out there want them to trade for Quinnen Williams. I don't think that's in the cards, right now. But with Aiden Hutchinson, with James Houston, with Charles Harris, some of those guys coming back from injury, you maybe have enough to mix and match up front. And especially if that secondary holds up, can cover for an extra half second, hey, that helps everyone. So you're still probably not looking at a top 10 defense, but this defense should be improved based on the changes they made this offseason.
In a pretty massive way, I would think. Being able to get Tracy Walker back. I mean, he only played 3 games last year, something like that.
Got hurt in week 3. Yep.
Yeah, and I loved. I mean, Kirby Joseph as a rookie. There were some splash plays that we were excited about. All those Aaron Rodgers interceptions. Anytime you can do anything against Aaron Rodgers, Lions fans are excited about it. But there's so much to be excited about with this secondary. I'm totally with you here. I thought, honestly, I was looking at the linebacking crew being probably the area where it felt like we needed to add talent the most. And I love Alex Anzalone. Like everyone else, I love Malcolm Rodriguez. Of course, I watch Hard Knocks, and you can't not fall in love with these guys, right? But being able to get a guy like Jack Campbell, who is a bigger, more prototypical middle linebacker, to play that role that we have not had, I think is going to be really valuable for us, in part because of, like you said, some of the deficiencies that we have up front, until we're able to get either a couple more pass rushers, someone to be able to pair that we know for a fact is going to fit on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson, or someone to set next to Aleem McNeil, who I think has been fantastic as well. So there's a lot to be able to like about these additions. Part of this, though, is being able to figure out you're not able to do everything all in one offseason. That's just how it works, right? The Lions did about as much as it feels like they could do in an offseason, though, because they fully redid that secondary, and it's basically like a whole new crew back there. So between that, the addition at the linebacker, our main middle linebacker, our starting middle linebacker now, there's going to be a totally new defense out there to be able to see what this Lions team looks like.
I mean, you're talking about a team that won 9 games last year. They're probably going to have 10 new starters combined on both sides of the ball, with the running backs and, including Big V at right guard, if he, is healthy, and Tracy Walker coming back, all those new faces. So they did not stand pat. This is the one thing I remember talking with somebody at the end of last season about the Lions, right? You go back, I think the 2011 season when Stafford he really sort of blossomed, it was year 3 for him, and he had that big year. The Lions made the playoffs sort of, out of the blue. No one expected them. And there were some big hopes going into 2012, but the Lions didn't do anything that offseason. And that really, I know if you talk to some people from that organization, and their hands were maybe a little tied financially, but that was the thing that, they sort of, they didn't go for it. Right. And this Lions team, same spot where maybe they're a year ahead of where people thought they were going to be in this rebuild, and they didn't stand pat. They're going for it. And they think they have. And I agree, based on what else is in the NFC, they think there's a window for them to compete. Mm-hmm. And, so they made some moves to make sure they could do that.
Justin, that's one of my biggest fears for the Detroit Lions now, is people in the media like Dave Birkett are saying really good things about them. You know how weird it is to hear good things about the Detroit Lions? When people at ESPN are like, hey, where do you think these guys are going to fall in the NFC? And it's a graphic of the Eagles and the Cowboys, and then Detroit is third. It's like, this feels like a lot. But like, this is one of those things. As Lions fans, I just want to say this. As Lions fans, we always want to hedge. We've been hurt so many times. It's like a relationship, an abusive relationship a lot of times, that we keep coming back for more because we love this team. I think this is the year. Like, you can buy in. I'm fully bought in on Brad Holmes and what Dan Campbell has done. The way that even CJ Gardner-Johnson and David Montgomery, they did an NBA 2K stream the other day. And it was like 2 guys that just got here, and they're talking about how much they love the coaching staff, how much they love the players here, how this just feels different. That doesn't feel like the Detroit Lions team that I knew 5 years ago. It feels like we're on the right path. So I don't know, really excited from that perspective, and try not to be nervous when I see them like mentioned with those other like upper echelon teams.
Well, and a quick shout out to my main host, Coach Sheps, at Coach Sheps. So he likes to say that the offseason is the season of hope. And I even heard Dave mention the word hope here. And that's kind of across the board, right? All 32 teams, we all have hope at this point. Mm-hmm. Big difference is the teams that have hope with a very active front office are usually the teams that have reason to hope. And we've never, at least not in my time of paying attention, we've never seen the Lions be this active in the front office and be this focused on trying to win. And let's face it, they're in a division that they very easily could. Like, the biggest hurdle is the Vikings. And I mean, it's the competition is there, right? So real quick, I'm going to lead into my last question here by kind of touching bases on the schedule a little bit, and then getting your guys' predictions for the 23 season. It doesn't have to be a win-loss record. It can be performance, whatever. But real quick, I want to touch base on the end of that schedule, because I believe it's the last 8 games of the season. You guys have 5 divisional games in those last 8 games. And then you also have the Cowboys to boot, who are probably a much improved Cowboys team in themselves. So that's a brutal end of the season. But the first half of the season seems pretty winnable. And you're also going to get Jameson back. So, I mean, there's real potential possibility here to kind of get that momentum going, kind of get a little bit of a lead in the division headed into that brutal schedule, and then you never know what'll happen, right? So I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know if you guys want to touch bases on the schedule or not, because I know a lot of teams like look bad now and they're going to be good, and then a lot of teams are going to be good, look good now and might be bad. But if you guys want to touch bases on the schedule, you can. But at the end of the day, as a Lions fan, what do you expect, like real real potential, like your real predictions here?
Man, look, the schedule is a big part of it. I mean, who they play and who's in the NFC for that matter. The past 30 years, the Lions have had to contend with Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, right? Two first ballot Hall of Fame quarterbacks that have been starting for a team in your division for 30 years. And that's a tough hurdle to overcome. And that's not there anymore. And the NFC North is completely mediocre. I mean, I think the Bears will be improved, right? The Vikings, most people think they were a little bit of a, house of cards last year. And I think they're fine, but they're not a team that you look at as being, wow, this Super Bowl, contender. The Packers, big question mark at quarterback. So beyond those three, the Lions, and this goes for everybody in the NFC North, they're also playing the NFC South. That's 10 games against mediocre competition, if we're being honest about it, right? And I know they open with Kansas City, and they've got the Chargers, and so there's some tough games on there. But that's 10 games that are imminently winnable, and that doesn't mean they're going to get them all, but that's a pretty good start to making the playoffs. So I look at where the Lions are. I look at who's on their schedule this year. I know we're talking here at the end of May, and who knows how all this shapes up, and there's some injuries and some things like that will certainly play a factor. And like I said, I still have some questions about Jameson and that receiving core, and we'll see exactly what he can be when he gets on the field. But I don't think it's unreasonable to expect the Lions. You can plug your ears for this one, Daniel, but to win 10, 11 games, I mean, to win the division, get a home playoff game for the first time in 30 years, that should be the goal. And if that doesn't happen, I think most Lions fans will be disappointed. I
totally agree. 100%. When you look at and that is solely due to the fact that the NFC South is pretty awful right now. Week 1's going to be tough against Kansas City. Although, you know what? For the first time ever as a Lions fan, it's I'm kind of pumped to see what they can do against a team like this. I've never been excited for them to play a team to be let's see how good we really are. It's just oh, great, there's a loss. I don't feel that way this year. This year feels different. And so going from Kansas City and Seattle to then you get Atlanta, Green Bay without Aaron Rodgers, the Carolina Panthers, and Tampa Bay. You've got a pretty good start to the season after that Kansas City game where you could really get going. I mean, the Lions could get rolling in a really nice way. And how nice is it to not have to worry about playing Aaron Rodgers at the end of the season in week 17 or 18? It feels like it's the first time in forever that we're not playing the Packers at the very end of the season. And it's because Minnesota is going to be the other team that we've got to contend with here. So I'm really pumped and excited to see. I'm with you. I think 10 wins is totally achievable with the way that we ended the season, with the way that the schedule sets up. Anything less than that, based on what we were able to build last year and all of the momentum coming out of the draft, the offseason, and what we've added, I think will feel a little bit like a disappointment. And I think 10 wins is sort of that baseline for where I feel like this is where Detroit should be based on the talent that we have and the steps that we've taken to become, a franchise that can compete.
I love it. You guys were absolutely phenomenal. I really appreciate your time. I know I've said that a couple of times, but I don't think you understand just what this means to me. And my son's going to be thrilled when he watches this drop. I haven't even told him yet that you guys are coming on, but he's a big fan of all things Detroit. I don't really understand
Good
how
for him. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a Colts fan, and you do the best you can to try to raise them right, and then they just end up being Lions fans. But I feel for them, right? Just like you guys, I feel for the fan base, and you deserve this. You deserve this hope. You deserve this opportunity, and I really do hope to see some great things from the Detroit Lions. So down at the bottom of your screen, I'm dropping their information again real quick. Make sure you give them a follow if you're not already. But Daniel, every Wednesday, right? That's when
every Wednesday
podcast drops. Absolutely awesome. And how about you, Dave? What's next on the pipeline for you?
Hopefully some vacation. No, OTAs are starting. We're shooting this or taping this on Thursday. Our first access to Lions OTAs is later on today. So plenty of just sort of wrapping up the spring before I get into a quiet time in the summer and come back for training camp. Because it's going to be, again, I think it's going to be I think they're going to be playing into mid-January. So we'll see how this one goes for the Lions.
Awesome. And just so our viewers know, coming up here really soon, I've got the preseason play-by-play announcer for the Bengals, Mike Watt, coming on for the Bengals breakdown. You can go back and check out all the other breakdowns. But as a little bit of an outro, here's my buddy John.
What's up, Title Tribe? We appreciate you watching the show. If you want to catch up on all of our college football content, make sure you subscribe to the CFB Nation by clicking their link below. Make sure you subscribe to the Toilets Titles Podcast Network by clicking our link below. And make sure to catch our other content by watching these videos to the side.